say old Mac, but he wasn't old. 41, I should say. But he always seemed old. मतलब उसका 200 Mac 40,000 पीस डॉलर के साथ निकले. And he says to me, I'm tired of hustling. You and me have been working hard together for 3 years. Say we knock off for a while and spend some of this idle money we have coaxed our way. ठीक है, कुछ टाइम के लिए आराम से अलग से रहते हैं और जो है फिर हम लोग स्पेंड करके आते हैं. The proposition hits me right, says I. Let's be nabobs for a while and see how it feels. What will we do? Take in the Niagara Falls or Bucket Faro? For a good many years, says Mac, I've thought that if I ever had extravagant money, I'd rent a 2-room cabin somewhere, hire a Chinaman to cook, and sit in my stocking feet and read Buckle's History of Civilization. मेरा मन है कि मैं कोई जगह ले लूँ, कैबिन ले लूँ, वहाँ पे चाइनीज़ कोई खाना वो होगा जो खाना बनाएगा और फिर मैं आराम से बैठ के कहानियाँ सुनूँ. That sounds self-indulgent and gratifying without vulgar ostentation, says I. And I don't see how money could be better invested. Give me a cuckoo clock and a Seb Pinner self-instructor for banjo and I'll join you. मैं भी तुम्हें ज्वाइन कर दूंगा कुकू क्लॉक और एक बैंजो लेकर के. A week afterwards, me and Mac hit this small town of Pina, about 30 miles from Denver. Denver से 30 मील की दूर में एक पीना का एक टाउन है, वहाँ पे वो लोग गए. And finds an elegant 2-room house that just suits us. Denver तो अमेरिका में है. हाँ. We deposited half a peck of money in the Pina bank and shook hands with every one of the 340 citizens in the town. सब 340 लोगों को और बाकी सबको जो बैंक में जो था पैसा डाला. We brought along the Chinaman and the cuckoo clock and the buck and the instructor with us from Denver, and they made the cabin seem like home at once. Never believe it when they tell you riches don't bring happiness. If you could have seen old Mac sitting in his rocking chair with his blue yarn sock feet up in the window and absorbing in that buckle stuff through his specs, you would have seen a picture of content that would have made Rockefeller jealous. बड़े आराम मैक जो था ना वो बैठा रहता था और को रहता था. And I was learning to pick out old Zip Coon on the banjo and the cuckoo was on time with his remark. ठीक है ना? क्या? मतलब ये अपना बैंजो अपना सीख रहा था. And our Singh was messing up the atmosphere with the handsomest smell of ham and eggs that ever laid on the honeysuckle in the shade. Eggs, ham खाते थे और मैक जो था आराम करता था, ये अपना बैंजो सीख रहा था. When it got too dark to make out Buckle's nonsense and the notes in the instructor, me and Mac would light our pipes and talk about science and pearl diving and sciatica and Egypt and spelling and fish and trade winds and leather and gratitude and eagles. अब जब शाम को जब रात हो जाती थी तो ये दोनों जो थे अलग अलग चीज़ों पे बात करते रहते थे. And a lot of subjects we never had time to explain our sentiments about before. मतलब खूब बातें करते थे. One evening, Max spoke up and asked me if I was much surprised in the habits and policies of women folk. तो मैक एक दिन आया बोला कि भैया तुम्हें क्या औरतों के बारे में ज़्यादा कुछ पता है? Why, yes, says I in a tone of voice. I know them from Alfred to Omaha. The feminine nature and similitude, says I, is as plain to my sight as Rocky Mountains is to a blue-eyed burro. I am on to all the little sidesteps and punctual discrepancies. तो ये भाई साहब बोले कि भैया फेमिनिन नेचर तो मैं बहुत अच्छी तरीके से समझता हूँ, है ना, वो सब औरतों को समझता हूँ. I tell you, Andy, says Mac with a kind of sigh, I never had the least amount of intersection with the predispositions. Maybe I might have had proneness in respect to their vicinity, but I never took the time. I made my own living since I was 14, and I never seemed to get my ratiocinations equipped with the sentiments usually depicted towards the sect. मतलब मेरी औरतों से मैक ने कहा मेरी ज़्यादा औरतों से मेलचाल नहीं क्योंकि मैं 14 साल से भी काम कर रहा हूँ. I sometimes wish I had, says old Mac. They're an adverse study, says I, and adapted to points of view. Although they're very irrational, I found them quite often obviously differing from each other in divergences of contrast. It seems to me, goes on Mac, that a man had better take them in and secure his inspirations of the sect when he's young and so preordained. I let my chance go by, and I guess I'm too old now to go hopping onto the curriculum. तो मैक ने कहा देखो अब मेरी बुढ़ापा आ गया है, अब पता नहीं औरत मिले या ना मिले, पर जब यंग होते तब शादी वादी कर लेनी चाहिए. Oh, I don't know, I tells him. Maybe you better take credit yourself with a barrel of money. और ये दूसरा आदमी कितना बड़ा है ये से थोड़ा छोटा है. Oh, I don't know, I tells him. Maybe you better credit yourself with a barrel of money and lot of emancipation from a quantity of uncontent. Still, I don't regret my knowledge of them, I says. It takes a man who understands the symptoms and byplays of women folks to take care of himself. In the world, तो इसने कुछ सांत्वना सी दी. देखो नहीं हुआ तो नहीं हुआ, नहीं औरतों के चक्कर में मत पड़ो, बच के रहो. We stayed on in Pina because we liked the place. Some folks might enjoy their money with noise and rapture and locomotion, but me and Mac, we had plenty of turmoils and hotel towels. अब ये लोग आराम से जो अपनी जिंदगी गुजारने लगे. The people were friendly. Our sing got the swing of the grub we liked. Mac and Buckle were as thick as two body snatchers, and I was hitting out a cordial resemblance to Buffalo girls. Can't you come out tonight on the banjo? Life अच्छी थी. मैक के भी कुछ दोस्त बन गए थे और ये अपना बैंजो पे गाना वाना बजाता रहता था. अब तुमको कपड़ा ले लो, उससे अपना नाक पे रख लो, देखो एकदम से रुक जाएगी. हाँ. One day I got a telegram from Sprite, the man that was working on a mine. I had an interest out in New Mexico. I had to go out there and I was gone 2 months. तो एक दिन उसको टेलीग्राम आया कि उसकी एक माइन थी, तो वहाँ पे उसको जाना पड़ा न्यू मैक्सिको में 2 महीने. माइन जिससे खुदान की जाती है, उसको 2 महीने जाना पड़ा था. I was anxious to get back to Pina and enjoy life once more. उसका मन था मैं पीना में वापस आ जाऊं और जिंदगी को एंजॉय कर सकूं. When I struck the cabin, I nearly fainted. Mac was standing in the door, and if angels ever wept, I saw no reason why they should be smiling again. The man was a spectacle. Yes, he was worse. He was a spyglass. He was the great telescope in the Lick Observatory. He had on a coat, shiny shoes, white vest, and high silk hat. अब जब उसने दरवाज़ा खोला तो देखा मैक तो पूरा ही बदल गया है. उसके शाइनी शूज थे, बड़ा कोट था, एकदम शाइन करके. पहले की तरह नहीं था. And a geranium as big as an order of spinach was spiked out in his front. And he was perking and warping his face like an infernal storekeeper or a kid with colic. Hello, Andy, says Mac out of his face. Glad to see you back. Things have happened since you went away. अब तुम 2 महीने से गए हो, कई चीजें हो गई हैं जब तुम गए हो. I know it, says I, and a sacrilegious sight it is. God never made you that way, Mac Lonsbury. Why do you scarify his works with this presumptuous kind of ribaldry? अरे तुम इतने बड़े नमूने कैसे बन गए हो? तुम्हें तो भगवान ने ऐसा थोड़ी बनाया था. Why, Andy, says he, they've elected me justice of peace since you left. जब से तुम गए हो मुझे जस्टिस ऑफ पीस का इलेक्शन भी हुआ है. I looked at Mac close. He was restless and inspired. A justice of peace ought to be disconsolate and assuaged. Just then a young woman passed on the sidewalk and I saw Mac kind of half snicker and blush, and then he raised up his head and smiled and bowed. And she smiled and bowed and went by. तभी एक औरत जो थी घर के सामने से निकली. मैक साहब ने अपना हैट उतारा, उसने भी अपना किया और वो आगे निकल गई. No hope for you, says I. If you have got the Mary Jane infirmity at your age, I thought it wasn't going to take on you. And the patent leather shoes, all this in 2 little short months. अरे तुम्हारा कोई चांस ही नहीं. अम्मा सुन रही हो? उसका दोस्त बोला तुम्हारा कोई चांस नहीं है संजय, 2 महीने में तुम इतने बदल गए. I am going to marry the young lady who just passed tonight, says Mac in a kind of flutter. Mac बोला मैं ये जो लेडी थी जो गई थी उसकी मैं आज शादी मतलब मैं उससे शादी कराऊंगा. उसके साथ कोई लेडी भी आई थी? वो लेडी गई ना. I forgot something at the post office, says and I walked away quick. I overtook that young woman 100 yards away. I raised my hat and told her my name. मैंने अपना हाथ किया, अपना नाम बताया. She was about 19 and young for her age. अब 19 साल की लड़की थी. She blushed and then looked at me cool like I was the snow scene from too often. वो blush किया और ऐसे coolly उसने उसको देखा लड़की ने. I understand you're about to be married tonight, I said. Correct, Shashi. You've got any objections? तुम्हारे शाम को शादी होने वाली है. लड़की बोली हाँ कोई दिक्कत. Listen, Sissy, I begins. My name is Miss Rebosa Red, she said in a plain way. मेरा नाम Miss Rebosa Red है. I know it, says I. Now, Rebosa, I'm old enough to have owed money to your father. मैं बुढ़ा हूँ और इतना कि भाई तुम्हारे पापा को पैसे वो कर सकता था. And that specious dressed up garbled seasick termite prancing about evidently like an irremediable turkey gobbler with patent leather shoes on is my best friend. मतलब मोटा मोटा ये जो बंदा है बुढ़ा स्पेशियस पूरा ड्रेस्ड अप ये मेरा बेस्ट फ्रेंड है. वाई डिड यू गो एंड गेट हिम इन्वेस्टेड इन दिस मैरिज बिजनेस. अरे तुमने इसको मैरिज बिजनेस में क्यों डाला. वाई ही वॉज द ओनली चांस देयर वॉज आंसर्स मिस रेबेका. अम्मा सुन रही हो. रेबेका कहती अरे यही तो एक चांस था तुमने मुझको मैरिज बिजनेस का क्या मतलब. Nay, says I gave a sickening look of admiration at her complexion and style features. With your beauty, you might pick any kind of a man. तुम जितनी सुंदर हो तुम्हें कोई भी लड़का मिल जाएगा. Listen, Rebosa, old Mac ain't the man you want. He was 22 when you was neat as the papers say. देखो जब वो 22 साल का था जब तुम पैदा हुई थी. This bursting into bloom won't last with him. ये जो नमूना बन के अच्छा घुस रहा है ना ये ज़्यादा दिन तक नहीं चलेगा. He is all ventilated with oldness and rectitude and decay. Old Mac's down with the case of Indian summer. Old Mac जो है इस पे प्यार का भूत. अम्मा सुन रही हो. तो भूत सवार हो गया ज़्यादा दिन तक नहीं चलेगा. He overlooked his bet when he was young and now he's suing nature for the interest on the promissory note he took the Cupid instead of the cash. इसने टाइम पे तो शादी नहीं की अब 43 पे आके अभी शादी कर रहा है. रेपोसा are you bent on having this marriage occur? Why, I'm sure, says he, oscillating the pansies on her head. And so is somebody else, I reckon. What time is it to take place, I asked. At 6 o'clock, says she. 6 बजे मेरी शादी हो जाएगी उसने कहा. I made up my mind right away what to do. I'd save old Mac if I could. To have a good, seasoned, ineligible man like that turn chicken for a girl that hadn't quit eating slate pencils and buttoning in the back was more than I could look on with easiness. Rebosa, says I, earnest, drawing upon my display of knowledge concerning the feminine intuitions of reason. Ain't there a young man in Pina, nice young man that you think a heap of? इस पीना में कोई भी अच्छा लड़का नहीं है जो तुम्हें पसंद आए. Yep, says Rebosa, nodding her fancy. Sure there is. What do you think? Gracious? Does he like you, I asked. Does he stand in the matter? Crazy, says Rebosa. Ma down has to wet down the front steps to keep him from sitting there all the time. But I guess that'll be all over after tonight. She winds up with a sigh. माँ जो है हाँ हाँ मुझे एक लड़का बहुत पसंद है. वो लड़का जो है स्टेप्स पे बैठा हुआ है रहता रहता पर आज के बाद वो खत्म हो जाएगा. Rebosa, says I, you don't really experience any of this adoration called love for old Mac, do you? Lord, no, says the girl shaking her head. I think he's as dry as a lava bed. The idea. अम्मा सुन रही हो. अम्मा ये बंदा तुम्हें क्या मैक बहुत ही ज़्यादा पसंद है. वो बोली अरे नहीं एकदम खटेला सा आदमी है. Who is this the young man you like, Rebosa? I inquires. It's Eddie Biles, she says she. He's clerks at the Crosby store, but he don't make but 35 a month. Ella Noakes was a wild about him once. Old Mac tells me, I says, that he's going to marry you at 6 o'clock this evening. अम्मा सुन रही हो. Old Mac कह रहा वो शादी करेगा at 6 o'clock this evening. That's the time, says she. It's to be at her house. Rebosa, says I, listen to me. If Eddie Boyles had $1,000 cash, $1,000 mind you, would buy him a store of his own. If you and Eddie had that much to excuse matrimony on, would you consent to marry him this evening at 5 o'clock? अम्मा सुन रही हो? अम्मा
हाँ सुन रहे हैं तुम्हारा
कि तुम आज उससे अगर उसके पास $1,000 होंगे तब तुम उससे शादी कर लोगी?
इसने कहा
हाँ. The girl looks at me a minute and I can see these inaudible cognitions going on inside of her as women will. $1,000, Stacey? Of course I would. Come on, says I. We'll go and see Eddie. We went up to Crosby's store and called Eddie outside. He looked to be estimable and freckled, and he had the chills and fever when I made my proposition. At 5 o'clock, says he, for $1,000? Please don't wake me up. Will you have the rich uncle retired from the spice business in India? I'll buy out Old Crosby and run the store myself. $1,000 Old Crosby का store मैं खरीद लूँगा और मैं खुद चला लूँगा. Thank you so much. We went inside and got the old man Crosby apart and explained it. I wrote my check for $1,000 and handed it to him. इसने $1,000 वहीं पे दिए, कहा कि देखो इसको एडी को स्टोर ले लो और फिर इस लड़की की एडी से शादी हो जाएगी. If Eddie and Rebosa married each other at 5, he was to turn the money over to them. And then I gave them my blessing and went to wander in the wildwood for a season. I sat on a log and made cogitations on life and old age and the zodiac and the ways of women and all the disorder that goes with the lifetime. I passed myself congratulations that I'd probably saved my old friend Mac from the attack of Indian summer. मैंने अपने दोस्त को बचा लिया, बहुत अच्छा किया, अपने वो चला गया. I knew when he got well of it and shed his infatuation and his patent leather shoes, he would feel grateful. To keep the old Mac disinvolved, thinks I, from relapses like this is worth more than $1,000. अरे old Mac जो है बस जैसा है वैसा ही रहे, उसकी ज़िंदगी चलती रहे, ठीक है. And most of all, I was glad that I made a study of women and wasn't to be deceived by any of their means of conceit and evolution. It must have been 5:30 when I got back home. I stepped in, and there sat old Mac on the back of his neck in his old clothes with blue socks on the window and the history of civilization propped up on his knees. This don't look like getting ready for wedding at 6, I says to seem innocent. Oh, says Mac, reaching for his tobacco. That was postponed back to 5 o'clock. They sent me over a note saying the hour had been changed. It's all over now. What made you stay away so long, Andy? You heard about the wedding, I asked. अरे तुम wedding का था? I operated it, says he. I told you I was the justice of peace. मैंने तुमसे बोला था ना कि मैं justice of peace हूँ. The preacher is off east to visit his court. जो preacher है, जो शादी कराता है, वो चला गया है. तो इसने उनकी शादी करानी थी. And I am the only one in town that can perform the dispensations of marriage. मैं खुद ही हूँ जो कि टाउन में शादी करा सकता हूँ. I promised Eddie and Rebecca a month ago I'd marry them. मैंने एडी और रेबेसा को एक महीने पहले कहा था मैं तुम्हारी शादी करा दूंगा. He's a busy lad and he'll have a grocery of his own someday. He will, says I. There are lots of women at the wedding, says Max, smoking up. But I didn't seem to get any ideas from them. I wish I was informed in the structure of the attainments like you said you was. That was 2 months ago, says I, reaching for the banjo. बिना बात उसने $1,000 दे दिए.
हुआ क्या इसका दोस्त आया
इसने बोला कि भैया मैं शादी करा